On a Walmart shelf sits a 4K TV with a bigger, sharper screen than the one on your wall, and it costs less than the shoes on your feet. The brand's one you'd struggle to spell. Walk 2 aisles over to the $1,000 Samsung. The screen in that cheap set and the one in the pricey Samsung were likely built by the same few Chinese companies. By the end, you'll see how a few factories in China took over the screen in almost every American home, and why the brands you trust now buy from the company beating them. Start with the price, because the price is the part that shouldn't be possible. 10 years ago, a 4K TV was a real splurge. You paid 4 figures for a big one, and you thought about it for a while before you did. Now walk into almost any Walmart, and the house brand ONN 4K set in 43 inches sits around $150 for most of the year. TCL and Hisense, both Chinese companies, regularly drop their 55-inch 4K models under $170 on sale. And on a holiday doorbuster, the cheapest sets slide down toward $100, sometimes below it. You probably already own one of these, hanging on the wall, working fine, and you barely thought about the brand when you bought it. Here's the strange part. They didn't just get cheap and bad. The picture on a 150 TCL today would have looked like witchcraft to someone shopping in 2013. It got cheaper and better at the same time, which almost never happens in electronics. For most of TV history, the screen was the hard part, the piece only a few high-tech countries could build well. That is the thing that changed underneath everything. Every review calls it a great deal and moves on. Almost nobody stops to ask the obvious question: how does anyone make money selling a television for the price of a nice dinner? The answer is sitting right behind the glass, and once you see it, the whole industry looks different. A flat TV is mostly one expensive part. It's the panel, the actual sheet of glass and electronics that makes the picture you watch. On a budget set, that single panel is roughly 2/3 of what the entire TV costs to build. Everything else, the plastic frame, the little circuit board, the stand, the remote, is almost an afterthought by comparison. So if you want to know who controls the television business, you can ignore the logo on the front completely. You look at who makes the panels. And this is the part that stays invisible at the checkout. Chinese manufacturers, led by a company called BOE, by TCL's panel arm CSOT, and by a third giant called HKC, now build more than 70% of the world's LCD TV panels. A couple of years ago, it was 65%, and it keeps climbing. In the biggest screens, the 90 to 115-inch giants, Chinese factories make almost 100% of them. It helps that the Chinese government has poured subsidies into these plants for years, and that a company like TCL builds both the panel and the finished TV in-house, shaving costs at every step of the line. And these are some of the most expensive factories on Earth to build. One new BOE plant alone is costing around $8.5 billion. Very few companies anywhere can write that check, and the ones that can are now almost all Chinese. So sit with what all of that adds up to. When the panel is 2/3 of the cost, and one country makes most of the panels on Earth, that country quietly sets the price of televisions for everyone. It isn't the brand on the front that sets that price. It's the factory in the back. It's natural to assume the famous names still make their own screens. They don't, and they stopped on purpose. Samsung, the company that has sold more TVs by revenue than anyone on the planet for 20 years running, shut down its own LCD panel production at the end of 2021. It walked away from making the glass, and the very next year, it sold its old LCD patents to that same Chinese company, TCL. Then LG made the move that should have been front page news and barely caused a ripple. In 2024, LG Display put its last remaining LCD TV factory in Guangzhou, China, up for sale. The buyer was TCL. The Chinese company paid about $1.5 billion, and the sale closed in 2025. With that one plant, TCL jumped to nearly a quarter of all the large TV panels made on Earth. Read that slowly. The Korean giant that spent decades fighting Chinese televisions sold its final screen factory to a Chinese competitor, and now buys the screens it still needs from that same competitor. This is the part that should wake you up. The two companies that defined what a television was for an entire generation made a cold calculation. They ran the numbers, saw they couldn't win at making the actual screen, and handed that job to China so they could chase higher margin technology instead. The living room brand a lot of people still picture, as the monopoly was already renting its most important part from a factory in Shenzhen. And it isn't stopping at cheap LCD screens. The plan was for Samsung and LG to retreat into OLED, the fancier panel inside the priciest TVs and phones, and own that instead. But China is already climbing that ladder too. BOE passed Samsung in smartphone OLED panels in 2024, and Samsung's own display executives have publicly warned that China could take over OLED next, exactly the way it took over LCD. Chinese OLED makers are already forecast to pass the Koreans in panel shipments within a couple of years, taking the one lead the Koreans had left. So the safer, higher-end business the Koreans retreated into is being taken over by the same Chinese rivals they wanted to escape. If you'd rather understand how your own house actually works than just scroll past it, subscribe. Every week I take one thing in your home and show you who really built it. Now watch what that panel takeover did to the brands themselves. Once you make the screens, the brand rankings are only a matter of time. For years, the order felt like a law of nature. Samsung on top, LG right behind, everyone else scrapping for the leftovers. Then TCL passed LG in worldwide shipments in 2022, Hisense passed it in 2023, and in 2024, the whole picture flipped. Three Chinese brands, Hisense, TCL, and Xiaomi, together shipped more televisions than Samsung and LG combined, the first time that had ever happened, according to the research firm Omdia. Their combined share hit 31.3% against 28.4% for the two Korean giants. In fact, for 1 month, in December 2024, TCL shipped more TVs worldwide than Samsung, taking the #1 spot outright, 16% of the market, to Samsung's 13%. And it shows up in your own neighborhood. Walk any TV aisle in America now, and most of the screens on the wall are Chinese badged, whether shoppers clock the names or not. And this is happening across a massive market. The world buys around 230 million televisions a year, so a few points a share is millions of homes changing hands. Now, to be fair, at the very top of the market, the or $500 and up sets, Samsung and LG still lead, and their picture quality up there is seriously hard to beat. But even that last stronghold is cracking. In a single year, Counterpoint Research found Samsung's share of the premium market fell from 41% to 29%, while TCL's jumped from 12% to 20% and passed LG up there for the first time. By late 2025, TCL was shipping almost as many TVs worldwide as Samsung itself, month for month. Samsung is still #1 in total revenue, still the loudest name in the store. But the gap that used to feel like a canyon has narrowed to a single step, and this time it's China pushing up from underneath, in the bargain sets and the expensive ones alike. So here's what really happened to the television while everyone was arguing about brands. For 20 years we thought the fight was about logos, about Samsung against LG against Sony, about which name made the sharpest picture, but the logos were only ever the surface. The thing that decided the winners was who could build the screen itself, cheaper and bigger than anyone else, 1 year after the next, until the competition simply couldn't keep pace. China won that race quietly, in factories most of us will never set foot in, and the falling prices and the shuffled brand rankings are just the rest of the world catching up to a contest that was already over. And this is bigger than a piece of trivia. The country that builds your television also decides what it costs, how good it gets, and how quickly it improves. And right now that country is China, whatever it says on the label. So the next time you spot a name brand 4K TV marked down to a number that feels too good to be true, look straight past the logo. Whatever the badge says on the front, the part that actually matters, the screen you're going to stare at for the next 10 years, was almost certainly made in China. Even more and more when that badge says Samsung.